Kristen McQueary, Rockford native, Tribune editorial board member. Kristen, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
How you doing this morning?
I'm great. I've only had 2 sips of coffee, so hopefully by the end of the interview I'll be really perked up.
Gosh, you're only like 200-300 behind us.
I got a ways to go, yes.
A bunch of stuff to get to, including a potential meeting of the leaders at a public forum to talk budget. But want to discuss your column from the end of last week. First, how Illinois Democrats hoodwinked the middle class. That's the piece, talking about some tax credits, some tax breaks to CME, same time closing developmental centers, and the pension liability increase in the past decade under total Democratic control. The line is that they're fighting for the middle class. Mike Madigan says we're not going to vote for anything that impacts the wages of those hard-working middle-class Illinois residents when, over the past decade, they haven't done nothing.
Right. I was starting to get a little irritated every time I heard the speaker, or really John Cullerton, or even sometimes Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, talk about how they are the party for the middle class. And if you just look at the way that, especially in state government, the way to kind of run state government into the ground, if they were for the middle class, they wouldn't have allowed pension liabilities to double, so that now those retirements of union workers are now in jeopardy, and the rest of us, I'm middle class, who aren't in a union, we're now trying to save for our own retirements and on the hook for $111 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. That's not representing the middle class. And if you just look over the past 14 years when it was exclusive Democratic control, every single CEO in the state or around the country who wanted a tax break got it. And they didn't get it from the Republicans. They got it from democratically controlled legislature, and Governor Quinn was particularly generous with tax breaks. So, and they also just haven't done things like minimum wage. I mean, they talked about minimum wage throughout the 2014 election cycle. They put it on the ballot for an advisory referendum. It was overwhelmingly supported. Have they passed one? No, because they don't really care about policy. They care about being in power. So I just sort of brought up in the column all the areas where they have failed the middle class.
And, and that's the other thing, Kristen, I guess that blows many people away is, in spite of the litany of things that you just ran down right there, a lot of people are more than willing to take Madigan, Cullerton at their word. Yeah, or Rahm Emanuel as well. Oh, well, they say, well, look, he just said he's for the middle class.
Right. They're ready to take them at their word, and they are ready to take their representatives. We have a supermajority Democratic-controlled General Assembly, and there's just kind of this division, I think, in voters' minds where they don't like Madigan, maybe they don't like Cullerton, but they like their Democratic state rep. And there needs to be or their senator, there needs to be more of a connection. These Democratic state reps and senators are electing this leader. Mm-hmm. And they're not rebelling, they're not doing anything to try to rein in the power of these 2 Democratic leaders.
Kristen McQueary with us from the Chicago Tribune's editorial board, chicagotribune.com. Of course, for her stuff, it's Riley and Scott on WROK. I want to go back to something you mentioned. I think it's important. The biggest issues that Democrats in Illinois talk about and want to try to push to the front. What are we talking about? We're talking about a minimum wage hike. We're talking about making the income tax progressive. We're talking about making the temporary income tax permanent. We're talking about shoring up the pensions. They had 12 years of total control in Springfield to do any of those things, veto-proof majorities in a number of those years, and they didn't do any of it. Why? Because it's more important and more useful to them to have those issues to wedge between themselves and voters who might think about voting Republican.
That's exactly right. And Mike Madigan has this philosophy where he's not going to take a risk unless he gets Republican votes. Mm-hmm. And this is all electioneering and politicking. It has nothing to do with policy. They could have put in place a graduated income tax, which I'm really tired of hearing progressives talk about, because that's what I point to. 14 years, total Democrat control, plenty of time and votes to try to get a progressive income tax. They didn't do it. So, and the other interesting thing about Madigan always wanting Republican votes, he wants that to kind of be able to hold that over their heads during election time. But the truth is, the Democrats have never really paid a price for any of this. Even when they passed the 67% income tax increase in 2011, in the middle of the night, during a lame duck session, they did not lose a single seat. the next election cycle, when they pushed all of our income taxes from 3% up to 5% personal income tax rate. They didn't pay a price for it. So especially after that, I don't understand why they aren't more willing to carry the mantle of some of these progressive causes, because there is no repercussion.
Back to what you were talking about before, in that, we're not happy with what the leaders are doing, but I like my individual rep, and pointing out, well, yeah, but that individual rep or senator is voting for this leadership, not rebelling. What will it take to generate some sort of rebellion?
That's such a good question. And I think you're starting to see it a little bit on the Democratic side with Speaker Madigan. At least you were. Toward the in the spring and during the summer, he just had kind of a dog and pony show operation. They brought all these groups down to talk about how the budget cuts were hurting them. And there was a little bit of rebellion in the Black Caucus. There was a little bit of rebellion among independent-minded Democrats. Madigan tried to pass a couple bills himself and failed, which was surprising that the speaker was on the floor at different points trying to pass legislation, and those pieces of legislation didn't pass. So there were tiny little peaks. But then you know what happened? It's election time again. And so any of those reps who dared to show a streak of independence are right now, trying to collect signatures, get on the ballot, not be opposed. They need Madigan's foot soldiers, his expertise, his lawyers, and his money. And so now they're one big cozy family again. Sure,
they might need some cash from the Illinois Democratic Party, which is run by Mike Madigan.
Yeah.
Kristen McQueary with us from the Chicago Tribune's editorial board. Now, the budget's still unsettled, as we well know. There was this push for a public meeting in Chicago among all the leaders for November 18th. Some said, okay, I'll be there, but then Governor Rauner said, we do these things in the governor's office, and we set the agenda here, and he's offering a meeting in the governor's office on the same date. Do you think a meeting of all the legislative leaders would move the ball forward at all on the budget issue?
I think a public meeting is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. And I would say that no matter who is in charge, this is not a partisan issue. You cannot negotiate in public. If you want another, they scheduled the meeting initially for like 3.5 hours. If you want to waste your time for 3.5 hours and have each side giving their talking points and not actually saying what they really think or getting anything done, then great, let's have a public meeting. But that is crazy talk. So Rauner is correct in, this has to be done behind closed doors if they're going to be serious about it. And, it's not that we're not going to find out what happened. This is how negotiations always have worked. Mm-hmm. They will go behind closed doors. They will come out and talk to the press. This is not a transparency issue or anything like that. It's just not. It's illogical to try to have a meeting like that in public.
Jim Edgar, last couple of weeks has been really, really helping out his friend the governor with some of his comments recently, leading some to believe, oh man, you've lost Edgar. Edgar's saying you need to sit down, you need to cave, you need to get the budget going. Budget's number one, and all that. What actually is the effect of what Edgar's been doing?
It's part of Rauner had a bad week, and I think when you have people like Edgar, and then Cranes, which is a business publication here in Chicago, they sort of came out against Rauner, saying, he needed to move the ball along. It adds to the pressure that Rauner's the one who needs to bend, but it really shouldn't be that surprising. I mean, Edgar was very much, and I really loved Jim Edgar, but he was very much a creature of Springfield. Mm-hmm. He didn't back Rauner in the primary. He was very critical of Rauner. He backed Kirk Dillard, who was his former chief of staff, and then he kind of slowly got on board with Rauner at the end. Edgar was always very generous with the public employee unions in this state. There was a lot more money back in the 90s when he was governor, so it's just a totally different situation. So, is it meaningful what he said? Yes, because it kind of puts a check in the box of the pressure building up against Rauner, but it's not really terribly surprising or revolutionary.
Okay, I was thinking about this earlier this week, Christian. Can you really exert pressure on Bruce Rauner? Look, he is wealthy beyond what he needs the rest of his life. He doesn't need to win re-election. He doesn't really care if he wins re-election. He ostensibly went to Springfield to actually fix what ails the system in Springfield. I mean, what pressure are you going to put on him? Oh, I won't give you money next time? Okay, I'll be fine. We're not going to vote for you? I got 3 years to try to govern the best I can before I leave. Can pressure really be exerted upon Bruce Rauner?
I think so. I mean, he's already given in on a number of positions that he took early on to try to negotiate with the Democrats. I mean, he is a Republican fiscal conservative who put new taxes on the table. So I'd be willing to raise taxes if I get this reform. So I think that sort of shows a little crack. And also, months and months ago, I think when I was talking to you two, you said, what's it going to take for this budget stalemate to break? And I said, one of the things might be all the outcry over social services. I mean, when you really see the harm of the developmentally disabled and agencies that serve the most vulnerable and people who are in crisis in their lives starting to close their doors, which is happening, you know, Bruce Rauner is a human being, and I do think that it's troublesome to him that this has gone on as long as it has, and these agencies are not getting paid. So that type of pressure, I think, is very real. And public opinion is a powerful thing, and the pendulum, especially after last week, you know, seems to keep swinging towards those Democrats who, you know, represent the middle class. I'm doing air quotes. And I think that is hard for a new governor to deal with.
Kristen McQueary with us from the Chicago Tribune's editorial board. It's Riley and Scot on WROK. The other thing that might lead to a breakthrough in Springfield is what Chicago needs. What Chicago needs, Chicago sometimes finds a way to get, and they need money, $800 million or so in funding or financial relief from Springfield, some changes to the way collective bargaining's done in Chicago public schools. How close is the city of Chicago to a break point? How much pressure might Rahm Emanuel put on Mike Madigan, other Democrats, to get something done so he can keep the city solvent?
Well, that just hits the nail on the head. That's what Rauner is waiting for. He wants Rahm Emanuel to put pressure on Madigan and Cullerton to help move some of his agenda if they want this money. And I don't blame him at all. I mean, this is money that Rahm needs for the city, for the schools, for Chicago Transit Authority. That's what that $800 million adds up to. And Rahm Emanuel goes before the city council tomorrow to try to pass a $550 million property tax increase that is reliant on a law change in Springfield and a signature from Governor Rauner. So will this actually happen? Will they get what they need from Springfield? I mean, Springfield's broke. So I think we have to wait and see how all this plays out. They've publicly been very much opposed, with Rauner saying, I'm not writing Chicago a blank check. So we'll see.
She's Kristen McQueary. She's a Rockford native, a Tribune editorial board member, and friend of the program. Kristen, as always, we appreciate your time.
Thanks. I'm finished my cup of coffee, so now I'm happy.
All right, half a dozen more, and we're all in the same ballpark.
Okay, thanks again.